You're right. I apologize for exceeding the word count. Let me rewrite this to fit the 4,500 word limit while maintaining the story structure. I never planned on buying a $1 million company just to get revenge, but when my stepbrother laughed in my face and said I'd always be nothing, something inside me snapped. If you want to see how I turned the tables on the family that tried to destroy me, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove success is the best revenge. When my mom married Richard Calloway, I was just 16, still grieving my dad who had passed away 2 years earlier. Mom called Richard her second chance at happiness. I called him the man who looked at me like I was taking up space in my own home. Richard moved into our modest suburban house in Connecticut with his son Derek, who was 2 years older than me and already had the entitled attitude of someone who'd never heard the word no. From day one, Derek made it clear that he considered our home his territory. He'd barge into my room without knocking, help himself to anything in the fridge that I'd bought with my own babysitting money, and make snide comments about how I should be grateful that his dad was taking care of us now. But Richard was worse. At least Derek was openly hostile. Richard operated with a polite veneer that made his disdain even more painful. "Brielle, sweetheart," he'd say at dinner, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I noticed your grades in math aren't quite as strong as Derek's. Perhaps you should consider focusing on subjects better suited to your abilities." My mom would just sit there, her eyes fixed on her plate. She'd already lost one husband. I think she was terrified of losing another. The turning point came during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to NYU with a partial scholarship, something I'd worked tirelessly for. NYU? Richard laughed when I announced it at dinner. "That's a very expensive school for someone who'll probably drop out to get married anyway. Derek is going to Princeton, following in my footsteps. That's a worthwhile investment." "I earned a scholarship," I said quietly. "And I've saved almost $15,000 from working." "That's cute," Derek snickered. "That'll cover what? One semester?" "I've applied for loans and additional scholarships," I explained. "And I'll work while I'm in school." Richard exchanged a look with Derek that made my blood boil. "Brielle, be realistic. Business school is competitive. It's not really suited for someone like you. Perhaps you should consider community college or maybe a secretarial program." "Richard," my mom finally intervened, her voice small but present. "Brielle's very smart. NYU would be lucky to have her." "Of course she's smart," Richard said with a dismissive wave. "For a girl. But the business world? That's Derek's domain. He's going to take over my company someday, build it even bigger. It's in his blood." "And what's in my blood?" I asked, my voice sharp. Richard looked surprised that I'd challenged him. "Well, your father was a high school teacher, wasn't he? Nothing wrong with modest ambitions." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "My father taught economics. He had a master's degree and was working on his PhD when he got sick. There was nothing modest about his ambitions or his intelligence." Now, Richard's tone was patronizing. "I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just being practical. Derek has been groomed for success his entire life. You'll never outshine him in business. That's just reality. I'm trying to save you from disappointment." That night, I made a decision. I accepted NYU's offer and took out every loan I could. I would live on ramen and work 3 jobs if I had to, but I was going to prove Richard wrong. The day I left for college, Richard patted me on the head like a child and said, "When business school gets too hard, you can always come home. Your mother will need help around the house anyway." I smiled, not trusting myself to speak. I hugged my mom goodbye, whispered that I loved her, and didn't look back as I boarded the bus to New York. My first 3 years at Vantage Capital were a blur of 80-hour work weeks, power suits, and networking events, where I learned to smile through gritted teeth when men talked over me or assumed I was someone's assistant. I built a reputation for having an almost uncanny ability to spot promising startups before they broke through, helping Vantage make several very profitable early investments. By 25, I'd been promoted twice and had started to build my own small team. My boss, Martin Eldridge, was a 60-something venture capital veteran who initially seemed skeptical of me but came to respect my judgment and work ethic. I had just turned 26 when I saw the news that Callaway Technologies was launching a new software platform aimed at revolutionizing supply chain management. The article featured a photo of Derek, now 30, looking smug in an expensive suit, standing next to his father. The caption identified him as the Chief Innovation Officer of Callaway Technologies. I knew for a fact that Derek couldn't innovate his way out of a paper bag. In college, he'd paid other students to do his programming assignments. Whatever this new platform was, someone else had developed it, and Derek was taking the credit. Curious, I did some digging. It turned out that Callaway had acquired a small startup called Logitech about 6 months earlier. The founders, two brilliant software engineers from MIT, had developed the platform that Derek was now parading as his brainchild. Further research revealed that Richard had bought the company for a fraction of its worth because the founders were in financial trouble and needed quick capital. I brought the information to Martin. Callaway Technologies is undervaluing their acquisitions, I explained, showing him the data I'd compiled. They're preying on struggling startups, buying innovative technology on the cheap, and then rebranding it as their own development. Martin studied my notes, his bushy eyebrows drawn together. You've done your homework, Brielle. What's your angle here? I took a deep breath. I think we should start competing with them for acquisitions, offer fair prices to these startups, integrate their technology properly, and give credit where it's due. Martin leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're not telling me everything. What's your connection to Callaway? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Richard Callaway is my stepfather. Derek is my stepbrother. They've been telling me since I was 16 that I would never succeed in business. Martin's eyebrows shot up. Well, that explains the fire in your eyes whenever Callaway comes up. He tapped his fingers on his desk. You know, revenge is a terrible reason to make business decisions. My heart sank. I should have known better than to let my personal feelings influence my pitch. But, Martin continued, identifying predatory acquisition practices and proposing a more ethical alternative. That's just good business. He smiled. Draft a formal proposal. If it makes sense financially, we'll consider it. I spent the next week creating the most thorough, data-driven proposal of my career. Martin approved it, and within 6 months, we had successfully outbid Callaway Technologies on 3 separate acquisitions. The real turning point came when I identified a struggling cybersecurity startup called Shield Protocol that had developed an innovative encryption algorithm. My sources told me that Callaway was circling, preparing to swoop in with a lowball offer. I flew to Boston to meet with them personally. The 3 founders were working out of a cramped office that doubled as their apartment, surviving on energy drinks and determination. Callaway offered us $2 million, one told me, exhaustion evident in his voice. We know it's worth more, but we're 3 weeks away from missing payroll for our small team. Vantage is prepared to offer you $8 million, I said calmly, plus performance bonuses if your technology meets certain benchmarks after integration. We also want you to stay on as lead developers with proper salaries and benefits. Your names will remain attached to your work. They accepted our offer, and the acquisition made headlines in the tech world. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature on the deal, describing me as the rising star at Vantage Capital who's changing the game in tech acquisitions. 3 days after the article was published, my mother called. Richard saw your name in the paper, she said without preamble. He and Derek are not happy. The next day, I received an email from Richard Callaway himself. The subject line read simply, Cease and desist. Brielle, it began without any greeting. Your recent business activities have come to my attention. While I admire your initiative, it's clear that your actions are motivated by personal grievances rather than sound business judgment. As a courtesy to your mother, I'm asking you to step back from any deals involving companies that Callaway has expressed interest in. Otherwise, I may be forced to have conversations with some of Vantage's major investors, several of whom I count as personal friends. I forwarded the email to Martin with a simple note. FYI. Thoughts? His response came within minutes. Forward this to legal. Then come to my office. Bring champagne. Martin's response to Richard's threat was to double down. We established a dedicated fund specifically for ethical tech acquisitions, and I was put in charge of it. My team expanded from 3 people to 15, and suddenly, I found myself with a budget of $200 million to invest in promising startups that aligned with our vision. The business press took notice. Forbes published a profile of me titled "The Woman Changing Silicon Valley's Acquisition Game." The article detailed my approach to valuing companies fairly and treating founders with respect, contrasting it with the more predatory practices that had become standard in the industry. The day the article came out, Derek called me directly. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 5 years. "Enjoying your little moment in the spotlight?" he asked without bothering to identify himself. "Hello to you too, Derek," I replied, keeping my voice even. "What can I do for you?" "You can back off," he snapped. "This childish campaign of yours is starting to affect our business relationships. Dad's furious." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not sorry at all. "But I'm just doing my job. If Callaway Technologies is feeling the pressure of fair competition, perhaps you should reevaluate your business practices rather than calling to harass me." Derek's laugh was ugly. "Fair competition? Please, we all know what this is about. You're still the same insecure little girl trying to prove something. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter how many startups you save from us or how many magazine articles they write about you. You'll never be one of us." "One of who, exactly?" I asked. "Entitled mediocre men who coast on their fathers' reputations." "You're right. I'll never be one of those." Over the next year, the competition between Vantage's Ethical Acquisition Fund and Callaway Technologies intensified. We consistently outbid them for promising startups, offering not just more money but better terms and a reputation for treating founders with respect. I was 30 when Martin called me into his office for what I thought was a routine meeting. Instead, I found him sitting with 2 members of Vantage's board of directors. "Brielle," Martin said with unusual formality, "the board has been impressed with your performance over the past few years. We'd like to offer you a new position. We're establishing a new division focused entirely on tech acquisitions and development, and we want you to head it. You'd have a seat on the executive committee and equity in the new venture." After the board members had left, Martin added, "I heard through the grapevine that Callaway Technologies is in trouble, financial trouble. Apparently, they've been overpaying on some recent acquisitions trying to compete with us, and several of their flagship products aren't performing as well as projected. There are rumors that they're looking for outside investment." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Richard's dismissive words from all those years ago. "You'll never outshine him in business." By morning, I had made a decision. I accepted Vantage's offer and immediately began putting together a team to investigate the possibility of acquiring Callaway Technologies. The investigation confirmed Martin's rumors. Callaway was overextended, their stock price was declining, and several key executives had recently departed. Richard was still firmly in control, but he was 65 now, and industry insiders whispered that he had lost his edge. I spent 6 months quietly building a case for acquisition. When everything was in place, I made my move. Rather than approaching Richard directly, I reached out to Callaway's board of directors with a formal offer. The number was fair, but not generous. Enough to save the company from its current troubles, but not enough to feel like a windfall. Most importantly, the offer specified that while most of Callaway's employees would be retained, the executive team would be replaced. The response was swift and furious. Richard called me personally, something he had never done before. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "Making a business decision," I replied calmly. "Callaway Technologies has valuable assets but poor leadership. Vantage can fix that." "This is about me," Richard accused. "About some perceived slight from years ago. You're trying to destroy what I've built because you're still holding a childish grudge." "No, Richard. This is about recognizing a vulnerable company with untapped potential. I'm offering a lifeline that your shareholders would be foolish to reject." True to my prediction, Callaway's board voted to accept the offer 3 days later, overriding Richard's vehement objections. The business press went wild with headlines like, "David acquires Goliath. Vantage's Brielle Parker set to take over Callaway Technologies." As the finalization date approached, I received a call from my mother. We hadn't spoken much in recent years. Brief conversations on birthdays and holidays, surface-level updates that never touched on anything real. "I saw the news," she said. Her voice was different somehow, stronger than I remembered. "You're buying Richard's company." "Yes," I confirmed, waiting for her disapproval. Instead, she surprised me. "Good. Good," I repeated, confused. "Richard has been impossible to live with since your fund started outbidding Callaway. He's angry all the time, drinking too much, blaming everyone but himself." She paused. "He's not the man I thought I married." "Mom," I said carefully, "are you okay? Do you need help?" "I filed for divorce last week," she said, and now I could identify what was different in her voice. Pride. "The lawyer says I'm entitled to half of everything, including his Callaway stock." The day before the acquisition was finalized, I made a decision that some might call petty, but that felt like necessary closure to me. I arranged for a live television interview with a major business network to discuss the Callaway acquisition. Then I made sure that Derek would be in the studio for what he thought was a separate segment. The television studio was sleek and modern, all glass and chrome with dramatic lighting. I arrived early, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, my hair and makeup professionally done. "Ms. Parker, we're thrilled to have you. This acquisition is the talk of the business world." "Thank you for having me," I replied. "I understand Derek Callaway will be here as well?" "Yes, he's in makeup now. He thinks he's doing a separate segment on the future of Callaway Technologies." The producer looked slightly uncomfortable. "He doesn't know you'll be announcing the leadership changes live." "Perfect," I said with a smile that probably looked a bit predatory. "That's exactly how I want it." The interview began smoothly enough. The host, a veteran business journalist named Diane Porter, asked intelligent questions about the acquisition, the vision for the combined companies, and the challenges of integrating two different corporate cultures. Then, right on cue, Diane brought up the topic I'd been waiting for. "Ms. Parker, there's been much speculation about what will happen to Callaway's current leadership, particularly CEO Richard Callaway and his son, Chief Innovation Officer Derek Callaway. Can you share your plans?" "Absolutely, Diane," I said, looking directly into the camera. "Transparency is a core value at Vantage. Richard Callaway will be stepping down effective immediately. We thank him for building the company and wish him well in his retirement." "And Derek Callaway?" Diane prompted. "I believe Derek is actually here in the studio today," I said, my voice pleasant but firm. "Perhaps he'd like to join us for this part of the discussion." Moments later, a visibly confused Derek was ushered onto the set. He froze when he saw me, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to understanding to fury. "Derek, thank you for joining us," Diane said smoothly. "Brielle Parker was just discussing the leadership changes at Callaway Technologies following the acquisition. I understand you two have a personal as well as professional connection?" Derek's jaw worked as he struggled to maintain his composure. "Yes, Brielle is my stepsister," he managed to say, the words sounding like they were being forced through gritted teeth. "As I was saying," I continued calmly, "Derek Callaway's position as Chief Innovation Officer is being eliminated, effective immediately." The studio went silent. Derek's face flushed deep red. "Our audit of Callaway Technologies revealed significant issues with the current leadership structure," I continued. "Specifically, we found evidence of systemic nepotism, credit misappropriation, and decision-making that prioritized ego over sound business judgment. These practices end today." "You can't do this," Derek hissed, momentarily forgetting the cameras. "I can and I am," I replied, my voice level. "The board has approved all leadership changes. Your company ID has already been deactivated, and security will escort you from the building when we return to the office." Derek looked like he might lunge across the table at me. Diane, sensing the tension, quickly interjected. Derek, would you care to respond to these developments? This is a personal vendetta, he finally said. Brielle has always been jealous of our family's success. She's using her position to settle old scores rather than making decisions based on business merit. I smiled, having anticipated exactly this response. That's why I've prepared a comprehensive report detailing the reasons for your termination, backed by data from our audit. I handed copies to both Diane and Derek. You'll find documentation of 5 major projects where you took credit for your team's work. 7 instances where you overrode expert recommendations, resulting in significant financial losses, and dozens of HR complaints that were suppressed at your father's instruction. Derek flipped through the report, his face growing paler with each page. You can't. The numbers speak for themselves, I said firmly. This isn't personal, Derek. It's business. Your performance doesn't justify your position or compensation. But I'm a Callaway, he protested, as if the name alone entitled him to lifetime employment. The company may still bear your name, but it no longer belongs to you or your father. Your shareholders voted to accept our offer because they lost faith in your leadership. Derek stood up abruptly, tearing off his microphone. This interview is over, he declared, storming off the set. Diane turned back to me, eyebrows raised. Well, that was certainly dramatic. Miss Parker, what message are you trying to send with such a public dismissal? The message is simple: merit matters. In my company, people will be judged by their contributions, not their connections. Their ideas will be valued, their work will be recognized, and their voices will be heard. Even if those people are women? Diane asked pointedly. Especially if they're women, or anyone else who's been told they don't belong in the boardroom, I replied. I was once told I would never outshine Derek Callaway in business. I'm not firing him to prove that prediction wrong. I'm firing him because he's bad at his job. But I won't pretend there isn't a certain satisfaction in correcting the record. The next day, I walked into the Callaway Technologies headquarters as its new CEO. The employees were understandably nervous, gathered in the large atrium for my first address. Good morning, I began. My name is Brielle Parker, and as of today, I am the CEO of this company. Many of you have heard rumors about what this acquisition means for your jobs, your projects, and your future. Let me address those concerns directly. This is not a hostile takeover designed to strip assets and fire employees. I believe the greatest asset of this company has always been its people, the innovators, the problem solvers, the ones who actually created the technology that made Callaway successful. Starting today, credit will go where credit is due. No more executives taking credit for your innovations. If you create something valuable, you will be recognized and rewarded accordingly. Finally, advancement in this company will be based on merit, not relationships. I don't care who your father is, who you play golf with, or what Ivy League school you attended. I care about what you can do, how you treat your colleagues, and the value you bring to this organization. 6 months later, the combined company was thriving. We had retained most of Callaway's talented staff while eliminating the toxic leadership culture that had held them back. Richard had retreated to Florida, reportedly bitter about the betrayal by his board and shareholders. Derek had tried to start his own venture capital firm, but without his father's connections and reputation to ride on, he was struggling to gain traction. My mother had moved to New York, and we were slowly rebuilding our relationship. One evening, as we were having dinner at my apartment, she asked the question I'd been half expecting. Do you regret any of it? The way you handled Richard and Derek? I considered this carefully. I regret that it had to happen at all, I finally said. I regret that Richard couldn't see my value, that Derek chose arrogance over collaboration, that our family fell apart instead of coming together after Dad died. But do I regret standing up for myself, proving my worth, and holding them accountable for their actions? No, not for a second. My mother nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Your father would be so proud of you, not just for your success, but for your integrity. You didn't just prove Richard wrong, you built something better than what he had. I had something to prove, I admitted. But now I have something to build. And that's much more satisfying. Richard had said I would never outshine his son in business. He was wrong about that, just as he had been wrong about so many things. But proving him wrong had only been the beginning of my journey, not the end. In the end, I hadn't just outshone Derek Calloway. I had transformed the very system that had been designed to hold people like me back. And that was a victory worth far more than revenge.